Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming to our conference today. If I could please ask everybody to take, we can get started. Thank you very much. Please take your seats. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Parliament Magazine's European Industry Forum. I'm Chris Alessi, editor of the magazine, and it's a pleasure to see so many policymakers, industry leaders, experts, and stakeholders gathered here today. Europe's industrial future has become one of the defining policy questions of this mandate. For years, discussions about competitiveness, energy security, supply chains, strategic autonomy often took place in siloed conversations. Today, they're inseparable. The energy crisis, geopolitical tensions, intensifying global competition, and the race for clean technologies have exposed both Europe's strengths as well as its vulnerabilities. The challenge facing policymakers is no longer simply how to decarbonize industry, but how to ensure Europe remains a place where industries actually invest, innovate, manufacture, and compete. That's why today's discussions matter so much. Over the course of this morning, we'll hear from policymakers, business leaders, and experts who are helping shape Europe's industrial future. Together, we'll explore how Europe can align its energy and industrial strategies, strengthen resilience, mobilize investment, and create the conditions that actually allow for long-term competitiveness. But before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Today's forum is on the record and being live streamed via the Parliament's LinkedIn page. We encourage everyone joining us, both in person and online, to follow the discussion and share their insights using the hashtag PMIndustry. I'd also like to thank the organizations whose support has made today's event possible. Our platinum partners, Fuels Europe and GE Aerospace, and our gold partners, the International Copper Association and the International Road Transport Union. And now it's my pleasure to invite our first speaker to the stage for a sit-down interview. Please join me in welcoming Bertrand Lehoudier, Head of Cabinet to Executive Vice President Stéphane Séjourné at the European Commission. Mr. Lehoudier, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for taking me out of the Berlaymont on the college day.
The Commission has obviously been widely discussed, has made competitiveness a central organizing principle of this mandate. And the Industrial Accelerator Act is emerging as a key piece of that competitiveness agenda. At its core, help us understand what is the Act really trying to solve, and how do you see it sort of fitting all together?
So we start directly with the difficult question of the IAA. No warm-up, but happy to answer that, and good morning to everyone. Look, the situation is quite simple but negative. When you look at it, you have, on the industrial side, you have tariffs in the US, you have a lot of unfair trading practices from China, a lot of them, and in the middle you have European industries that are a bit squeezed and that are basically suffering from this geopolitical situation. And the consequence is quite clear. Every month, we are losing 20,000 industrial jobs, in particular in our energy-intensive industries, like the automotive sectors, the chemicals, and others. So, of course, we have to do something for the jobs, for the know-how, also for independence, because all these jobs behind you have your independence, your ability to master your transitions, your transformations. So we have to do something. So the IAA is not the only answer, and I'm happy to take a lot of other questions about all the other pillars of our competitiveness agenda, but it's a very important shift in terms of mindset and in terms of paradigm to address this very difficult economic situation. And basically, there are three simple principles we are trying to set in this law, and I'm sure you are now very familiar with it, because a lot of journalists have been writing about it. One is about how you stimulate the demand for a lot of products. So one is how, when you use public finances in every type of form, public procurement, public subsidies, auctions, and so on and so forth, how, when you use taxpayers' money, you should primarily support the production here in Europe. That's the first basic principle. The second basic principle, and it's basically the second chapter, is whenever you have foreign direct investments in key strategic sectors, how do you make sure that they guarantee the highest added value here on the European soil, with technology transfer, with local employment, local supply chains, and so on and so forth. And the third one, after the public investments, the foreign direct investments, is about the private investments. How do you make sure when companies, probably like some of yours, want to run some projects, decarbonation projects, investment projects, new factories, how do you make sure this is as fast as possible? It takes too long, so how do you make sure the access to the permitting, the access to the energy grids, to the raw materials, etc., is faster? So these are the three main principles, and it's mostly targeted on three sectors: energy-intensive industries, and I can enter into more details if you want, automotive sector, and the clean technologies. And it's even more relevant now than when we proposed it, because now you have the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, there is even more reasons to be energy independent. Of course, but then when you want to be energy independent and defossilize your economy, you have to make sure you also own the technologies. So you also have to own, not only you have to deploy low carbon technologies, homegrown energy, you also have to own the technologies that are behind it. Otherwise, you create new dependencies. So it's even more relevant to have the Accelerator Act now in this new geopolitical situation.
So, in terms of the first pillar of that, the public finances, and that leads us to the question of sort of buy European and what that means. And some would argue that sort of portends a protectionist route for the EU. Others would say no, it's necessary in this current geopolitical framework. How do you read those arguments around protectionism and that it's actually just building barriers?
I think it's not at all protectionism, and actually we've built into the proposal a whole new concept of trusted partners, to which we will involve in our Made in Europe strategy. So that's the way we build it. Then how you define it? It's quite simple. Again, it's very common sense in a way. We will respect our international commitments, if our partners respect theirs, and if there is reciprocity. So at the end of the day, the big concept, and I see it now very consensual in the college, in the council. We had the Competitiveness Council last week. In the parliament, we had a big hearing yesterday in the parliament. When you say reciprocity, in the way you open your markets, it's quite consensual at the end of the day. So I think that's how I answer your questions. But again, then we have to be very clear. In our new competitiveness agenda, and there are huge changes in the Commission, you need many different layers to make it work. You need the simplification, okay, but you need the demand. That's where Made in Europe comes in, because when you ask companies to do a lot of investments, you need to make sure they have their order books being filled. So if I ask a steel plant, a cement plant to decarbonize, that's like multi-billion capex investments. We need to make sure someone will pay the premium. So that's the whole idea of lead markets. So you need the demand, you need the investments. Of course, there are a lot of private investments, but you need to accompany this with the access to capitals, with our public finances, the MFF, and so on. And you need the supply side as well. That's why we're speeding up permitting. We are doing a lot on critical raw materials, on skills, and so on and so forth.
But help us understand where you draw the line between supporting European industry and sort of recognizing global value chains and how Europe fits into that.
That's a very good question. The best way to do it is to go really sector by sector, technology by technology, because each and every one of them is very different. When you think, for example, of the automotive sectors, you look at our suppliers. We are very strong with our suppliers. 70% or 80% of a car has EU content components. So we are very strong on that part. So that part, when we come with the IAA, it's more to say we have to stop the bleeding. There is unfair competition from China. We need to make sure we remain at this 70, 80%, while the projections show it can go down in terms of EU content to 50%. But then there are other types of technologies, like the batteries. We are still very far from being a leader on the batteries. So you see it. So there you need to have a concrete battery plans in terms of how you support our gigafactories to produce, because they are in the ramp-up phase where they burn a lot of cash into learning how to produce and reduce the production cost. So you have to support them. You have to have my foreign direct investment conditionalities to get the technology transfer from those who are a bit ahead, like the Chinese. You need the EU content to make sure that when a car is being subsidized by taxpayers' money, and there are a lot of tax rebates and so on and so forth, then the OEMs are obliged to buy some of our European batteries, in particular with the most relevant components, for example, the cells. And so you have to build, sector by sector, very in the granularity, very precisely what you want. And every time is different. On the solar panel, we've lost that battle 10 years ago. But we want to be strong on the onduleur. I have the word in French now. Inverters. On the inverters, which is the brain of your solar panel. That part, we really want to reshore it in Europe because we think it's the most critical part for even our security, economic security. So you have to take each technology separately, which is why as well you have the IAA and the sectors I'm mentioning, but today we have a digital sovereignty package, tech sovereignty package being discussed, because that sector deserves another type of made in Europe. You cannot design it the same way with very specific components or the same way we approach the IAA. These are a lot of software, for instance, so you need to build it differently. You need to have sovereignty criteria and stuff like that. We had the medicines package, critical medicines. Then again, it was a different approach. You had to really focus on what were the most critical medicines. We will have a biotech act, so you can count on us to push made in Europe and production here in Europe across the board. But you can also count on us to be very targeted in the way we approach each sector very specifically.
How do you see the IAA fitting in with, let's say, a more robust industrial policy in the US and obviously a very strong industrial policy in China? How do you sort of see it vis-a-vis those two countries that in some ways Europe has been caught in the middle of in this entire trade dynamic of the Trump administration?
I think in this world we have entered, if we are not economically strong enough, Europe cannot have a voice on the global stage. So you can do a lot of diplomacy, but if you are not economically independent on what counts the most, on the most strategic technologies, then basically they know you are dependent and you cannot speak your voice. So that's why, to be even stronger on the geopolitical scene, we need that competitiveness agenda, and it takes all its sense. Then what you see in terms of dependencies is we are very dependent from the clean tech from the Chinese side and very dependent on the digital tech from the US side. What we want is to be much more independent. And what we were saying in the previous mandates was you need to build resilience, you need to build diversification. This mandate, because of the urgency, we go one step further and we say, no, actually what we want is to produce these things here in Europe. We won't be able to do 100%, of course. And we have to respect, as you said, the global value chains and how much they are intertwined with some of our G7 partners, for instance. Absolutely, and we will do that. But we have to do much more here in Europe.
Okay.
And that's one of the big, I think, one of the big shifts of this mandate.
How do you future-proof that, particularly as technologies and markets evolve, and we've seen how quickly the geoeconomic order has shifted in a year and a half or a year plus or so? What can you do to future-proof that?
Yeah, there is a difficult governance questions. It's about how much empowerment can the Commission get from the co-legislators. This has very bad press at the moment. We want to reduce the number of delegated acts for many reasons, many good reasons. But we feel all these initiatives should be some kind of toolboxes so that you can adapt them. So when you see you've done a job of one sector or the other, or you need to readapt the different parameters you've set for another sector, you can change them a bit with a fast track, which is a delegated act or an implementing act. Mm-hmm. We think that's the best way to have a toolbox, in a way. So that's how we are trying to address it. Again, that's, as you know, not very easy with co-legislators to get empowerments. But the problem is that if in 2 years from now, in the IAA, for instance, we set a lot of mandatory percentages for different sectors to buy low-carbon steel, cement, and aluminium, okay? Very soon, we will want to do that for chemicals, for ceramics, for many other energy-intensive industries. If I have to go back to a new proposal, a new long impact assessment, a new long commission process, and a 2 years co-decision process, those industries by then will be dead. Mm-hmm. So I need more like this kind of 2 to 3 months, very fast-track approach when I want to address them. And it's the same for the clean technologies, the same for the automotive sectors. We cover very well the electric vehicles, hybrids. Again, I said the batteries, the buses, and so on. Maybe we want to cover other parts of transport as well. And for that, you need agility.
So when sort of critics argue that the competitiveness challenge is more about all the red tape, how do you see the IAA fitting into the broader push for what I might call deregulation and you might call simplification in Commission terms? How does it fit into that, in a sense?
You mean on the IAA specifically? Or
yeah, the IAA in particular.
That's another big, after the Made in Europe shift of this mandate, that's another big paradigm shift in the Commission, mm-hmm. is that we are trying to be as simple as possible. We are doing a lot of omnibuses. Half of them actually come from my executive vice president. And we'll continue to do that, because the less reporting there is, the more the companies have time to invest, innovate, and do what they are best at. So that we are trying to continue, and we'll keep on doing that, absolutely. And in the IAA, it's the first time, I think, in one of the Commission initiatives, that we even go as far as self-certification. So we kind of say, look, if you want to be simple, we set all these rules. They are super important because we want everything to be, as much as possible, to be produced in Europe, but we trust our companies will do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So compliance will not come from the reporting and all the documents you have to fill, but they will come from the compliance ex post. Then you will be checked that you are doing what we are asking, but we will check afterwards with sanctions if need be. But we trust you. We trust you will do it. That self-certification, mindset is a big change. Mm-hmm. Big change in how the Commission approaches compliance. And one example that we have in the single market that works very well is the CE marking. The CE marking works super well. Everyone thinks the products are very robust and comply with EU law when they have a CE marking. That's as well is certification, self-certification. It works well. Why? Because when you don't play by the rules, we trust you, but if you don't play by the rules, then you are sanctioned. So I think that's very important. But again, as you say, in the IAA, there are a lot of things, but you need to have the economy, restarting and to have reindustrialization in all these sectors. You need to align all the enablers of your business case. Simplification is one. Demand made in Europe is another. Investments, affordable access to affordable energy, strong level playing field vis-à-vis the unfair trading practices. That's, you have to do them all at the same point. What I've noticed for the last year, let's say a year and a half since we are at the Commission, is that if one of these business enablers is not there, then the companies don't invest. Mm-hmm. They don't invest. You need all of them to be in there for them to invest, either in new factories, expansion of factories, ramp up, scale up, you name it, decarbonation, and so on and so forth.
Final question. What would you like to look to at the end of this mandate as proof that the IAA has strengthened Europe's industrial base and its competitiveness?
That's a good question. Look, for me, what matters then is the results on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can do all the best policies in the world. There can be a lot of good discussions. We co-construct that with the companies, with the trade unions. We do that with the co-legislators. But what matters is that at the end, European industries and the share of European industries in our GDP grow.
Mm-hmm.
That's what matters for me, and that they do reinvest in Europe. They do expand in Europe. For me, that's the most relevant. Again, we will push in every initiative, in one way or another, made in Europe to support our European industries. Again, as you say, in a smart way, involving some of the trusted partners, making it as simple as possible, reducing the cost, and so on and so forth. We will do that. But what we have to make sure is that there is more production here in Europe on what really counts: clean tech, digital tech, biotechnologies, defense, security, critical raw materials. I mean, you name it. We will push this, but it has to change on the ground. Because in the end, if it doesn't change on the ground, and it still takes a lot of time to do a plan, to do permitting, it still takes 8 years to get plugged to the energy grid when you electrify your site, when you don't have the necessary skills that you need, when some of the inputs that you require are still weaponized and blocked somewhere else on the planet, then concretely that doesn't work. So I think we should be judged, but only by the end of the mandate, on how much we supported that business case, and so how much then the European industries have grown on the European soil and the European continent.
Okay, good note to end on then. Thank you very much for your time, Bertrand.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you.
Everybody could please stay seated. We'll get started with our first panel, Building a Competitive and Sovereign Europe. And I'd like to welcome to the stage Kirsi Erkrath-Mansilla, Head of Unit for Member States Reforms and Investment at DG Grow at the Commission, MEP Esther Lakos, and Massimo Castorina, Sales and Commercial Strategy and Marketing Lead at GE Aerospace. Hi, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. I think wherever you'd like. Go right here. Oh, so do we just start with that?
Hi, Kirsi Erkrath-Mansilla, DG Grow.
So we're apparently just waiting on MEP Lakos, but we're going to jump in anyway. So just bear with me. Well, thanks to both of you for being here. This session is obviously about how Europe moves from strategy to execution on competitiveness and sovereignty, and where the bottlenecks sit around governance, funding, or industrial capacity. So I'd like to explore from three perspectives: coordination at the EU level, the role of investment and innovation policy, and what this looks like in practice for industry. But Kirsi, let me start with you. The EU has a dense set of competitiveness and industrial initiatives, a toolkit, as Bertrand was talking about earlier. From your perspective, what's still missing in terms of how Europe coordinates public investment and industrial strategy?
That's a tricky one. Indeed, we've been very, very productive, I think, in this commission and before. But what I must say that what I've seen over my career in Brussels is that now is the best moment for industrial competitiveness, overall competitiveness for Europe. So I think the Commission is really trying to do everything it can to help, support European industry in order to ensure economic security and reduce our dependencies and make sure that, we have a solid industrial base. What is missing, I think, what is missing is to see the impact of all these initiatives, because they keep popping up. And they have been prepared with the help of everybody. Everybody has contributed, there are consultations and all that. But then once they're in place, we need to see how they work, and that takes time. And I think one other thing which has not been there in place before, and which is now there is the new competitiveness coordination tool. It's called a tool, but it is actually a cooperation mechanism. And that, I think, will change a little bit the perspective overall. I mean, often we are focused only on reforms or investments, and people are looking at what is of interest to them or even member states. This tool will help everybody work together and address both reforms, investments, and the sort of cross-border nature of investments and reforms in Europe overall. And I'm happy to talk more about that later on.
Well, quick follow-up would just be sort of where you still see fragmentation when it comes to sort of EU regional and member state industrial capacity.
Yeah. Clearly, I mean, you've seen the single market strategy of last year, the infamous terrible 10. So, I mean, we've had the single market in place for a long time already, but these terrible 10 barriers to the cross-border trade in particular, they persist. And, I mean, there are a lot of forever problems. I've been in Brussels for 30 years. I worked on SME policy for a long, long time, and I think that the problems are still there. We fix some things, but they are not completely gone. So, I think we have to keep on working more and addressing the remaining barriers. But what I think has changed is the sort of urgency, the importance, because of the current geopolitical environment, the need for, defend Europe in a way. I mean, collaborate, like Bertrand Huguet said, but also defend European interests, so that we've seen in the past crisis that we've had that we need to be prepared. So I think what has changed, we've understood all that we need to be ready to do things perhaps a bit more faster.
Thank you. Emi Pilakos, welcome. Glad you could join us. Would love to hear your perspective on some of what was just said on from the parliamentary side, and then I'd love to ask a bit about your work on Horizon Europe and how that fits into this wider discussion.
Thank you for the invite. Apologies for the slight delay. So in the Parliament, now you are aware that we are discussing in the ITRE, especially two very, very important files. One is the ECF, so the Competitiveness Fund, and the other one is Horizon Europe, so the framework program for research and innovation. And the last one is no novelty, but the first one, indeed, it is. And this basically entails above 20% of the budget of the next MFF, how it has been proposed, at least by the Commission. And I think that there is, generally speaking, an agreement on pushing these topics. But the budget talks, they are another cup of tea, let's put it like this, because different interests are clashing there. So from the Parliament side now, I mean, there is a lot of awareness, of course, on how important innovation is in boosting competitiveness and growth. I mean, this is one of the main priorities along defense of the Commission and also of the EPP, so my party group. And here there are certain issues like the Gordian knot to be cut is how to link the two programs. So the Parliament has been fighting a lot for a self-standing framework program for research and innovation. We got it, but this has to be linked in a certain way to the Competitiveness Fund. And here it's not just a matter of how different instruments will make this umbilical cord, to say that, between the two big programs, but what kind of governance we are going to have. We have a Commission proposal. The Parliament is shaping now its own proposal, which is meant to be very much led by experts. Expert-driven councils are supposed to be set up. It's still in the making, but this is the way how we are mainly thinking. And also that will be unfold, of course, on the different work program levels and how to set the priorities and the course. So this is a very important and structural issue. And of course, how to preserve within this framework Horizon Europe. so that its priorities are not hijacked by the industrial policy. Although, of course, as I said at the beginning, the link between the two is really crucial. And we are discussing now very intensively because we are planning to have, that's the plan, in October already a vote on our position. I understand that also the Council is speeding up, although there was no partial general approach last week at the Competitiveness Council. And just to mention maybe one thing without entering too much into the nitty-gritty is the importance of the second pillar within all of this, so the collaborative projects and the different research and innovation partnerships together with the industry. For the time being, basically it's 1/4, so 25% of the current budget of Horizon Europe. And of course, how I expect is that partnership will have a prominent role because they are very well linking basically the research program with the competitiveness fund. And last thing to mention, this is my priority because I'm coming from a Central Eastern European country, is widening participation. Of course, this is an excellence-driven program, Horizon Europe, but while respecting these principles, how can we involve the talents across the European Union in order really to harvest what we have here? I think it's very much linked also to strategic autonomy and convergence in innovation, because if we keep, this knowledge at home in the continent, we are stronger together at the global stage. So initially only.
Okay, thank you. Lots to unpack with that. But Massimo, I'd like to bring you in for a moment from an industry perspective. When you hear all of this talk about competitiveness, what is it that that you're looking for when you think about breaking down barriers and actually having policy deliver for the European industrial base, in essence?
Good morning, and thanks for having me here today. Thank you very much. We think on an industrial standpoint, as you mentioned, that when we're talking about Europe, being European, we need to consider that under a comprehensive view. We need to understand where we are creating value in Europe and how we are doing that. Creating value means different things, of course. It means creating manufacturing production capabilities or creating technologies, new technologies and IP available for the European companies. It means also, and maybe above all, cooperation with the different partner players, companies, suppliers, SMEs, institutions around Europe. So this is what we globally have to look at when we are considering this approach. And just to give you some examples, for my company, okay, Avioaero. Avioaero is a fully European company based in, headquartered in Italy, in Turin, but we have premises pretty much in several countries, in Italy, in Czech Republic, in Poland. And when I consider what my colleagues are doing right now, maybe they are working in Turin somewhere in the manufacturing technology, but they are strictly cooperating with all the network, with all the ecosystem that we're doing in Europe, of course. And that's the most important thing I consider. How deeply you are rooted in Europe, how deeply you are interconnected with other entities. And so the value you are creating is used and made available in Europe, of course. And you're doing this through all the different means. As I say, manufacturing. You are creating new manufacturing capacity and capabilities in Europe. You are creating job opportunities. You are creating investment in Europe. Technologies. You are creating IP for the European governments, for the European ecosystems, which is ruled through the European rules, of course. And you are creating a network of cooperation with universities, with institutions, with research centers that are creating additional value to the whole European ecosystem. So when we think about Europe, we need to think globally the way we are creating value for Europe, not basically and merely to the administrative burden of where the headquarters of a company is.
One quick follow-up for you. When you think about sort of what's more important for you from a business perspective? Is it regulatory predictability, or is it funding support when you take long-term industrial investment decisions?
Well, actually, both of them. It's difficult to give you one or the other answer. You need predictability, of course. I mean, the basis of every investment is to understand what are the rules for that investment. So clearly, that is important. Every investor will look at the longer term, not simply at the current day situation. But also funding, of course. Rules for having access to funding must be clear, okay? It must be understood in the longer term. But we completely praise for competitiveness when we're talking about funding. You want to have funding when you're able to make a proposal, a value proposition, which is definitely not a pure administrative thing, but something which has a long-term perspective, okay, in creative additional opportunities for the company I'm working for and globally for the industry I'm working for.
Okay. Kirsi, to come back to you for a moment, the Commission gets, let's say, criticism at times perhaps that it has many acts and strategies and so forth, but hasn't actually maybe forcefully taken steps to implement all these in a broad-based long-term way. What do you say to that kind of criticism when it comes to this conversation?
I think that there is probably a little bit of truth in that, to be very honest, and this is probably totally politically incorrect to say, but I mean, we are very good at coming up with new proposals, but they come from a real need to help Europe. So, but we'll have to sort of look beyond the Commission terms, and I think I'm there as a civil servant, so it's my job and everybody else there who is implementing these things. So we are actually following through them, whether trying to put things in place, follow up if it works, if it doesn't work, and fix things then. So I think that we are doing that. Probably the issue is, what the outside world sees is all these new initiatives, and that gives that impression indeed that Commission is not following through. But there are thousands of civil servants, not enough, I must say, with the new priorities, but we are there and we are following through and implementing. If you're thinking of coherence, I think we have some sort of umbrella tools where we are pulling things together. And I think the big policy framework is the European semester, the annual economic governance review, and the spring package is coming out today, actually. So you will hear not only about macroeconomic situation in the member states, but what I think is to this audience more interesting is all the microeconomic elements there. So you have all the single market things, what is the situation in the member states. I mean, there are some information about European level, but we are really focusing on the situation in each member state there. And I think that is trying to take a more global approach of what are the key issues there. I can't tell you what's in it because the press conference will be later today, but what I can say is that there's a clear sort of urgency and shift towards this economic security that has come up already many times this morning. So, I mean, that will also be part of the semester. But if you're interested in certain countries there, how they're doing, do have a look. We are also putting in there in the semester package some of the European initiatives and some results, deliverables already on those, even though that semester is not supposed to be about what the Commission does so much, but it's really what the member states are doing. But I think that is an attempt at, and a good one at that, to look at things a bit more globally overall. So, but then there are others. I mean, all the simplification work that was mentioned already as well. I mean, there are these summing up documents which are looking at what is happening. I mean, for example, the 10 omnibuses so far have, I think, saved 12 billion euros already, and the goal is higher. So So we do have this sort of a review perspective as well. And we are learning from lessons as well, with the Recovery and Resilience Facility coming into an end this year. And we are preparing for the next multi-annual financial framework. We are learning from the experience of that huge tool as well, and what worked and what could be used in the next cycle. So there is, I mean, you can always, nothing is ever perfect. Let's put it this way. So I think that maybe there could be better follow through, but we are also, constrained with resources in the Commission. So we are doing what we can, but with more policy topics coming on top of what we're doing, it's a quite a challenging task, I would say. But we are following through at a very operational level, everything.
Okay. MEP Lakos, Horizon Europe is often praised for many of the reasons that you said, but also criticized for its complexity and fragmentation. What's your assessment of its effectiveness in driving competitiveness and how it fits into the broader Commission strategy outlined here?
So I think Horizon Europe absolutely fits in the Commission's strategy, because we know it for already long years, and we have the economic data on that, how research and innovation drives productivity and growth. And I think no wonder, to say that this is at the very core of our quality of life. So, I mean, if you have no money, then, you don't have all the social expenditure, but it's like typical in Europe. So just to make this political preach on that, and of course, how we put ourselves on the global map in terms of technology, the race for the best technology, and I have to link there also to defense, of course, because I tend to say that the winner takes quite all in this regard. And Horizon Europe is an excellent tool to that. It's not just the biggest European R&I program, but globally speaking, it's the biggest one. Now it's 90 billion, a little bit more, and it's around 200 that we propose from the Parliament side. So a lot of money. Of course, it's never enough. And you have there the blue sky research, bottom up, totally. Often also Nobel Prize winners come out of these programs. So it's excellence of the excellence, basically, top notch. We have in the third pillar the EIC. So when you can also collaborate, of course, but when you have a smaller, mid-sized company that is really doing something breakthrough, and this is bottom up again, although we have some challenges, and here we link, I think, to the strategic autonomy and also how we make political choices, so where we focus our efforts. And then the second pillar that I was talking about, the real collaboration. And here I would like to just link what Massimo has said before, how important this pillar is, because of, amongst others, the partnerships and the innovation ecosystems as well. So you can, innovation is always local, of course. From smaller, mid-sized projects, you create the structure, you create the network around, and it's not only about money, but the coaching, the mentoring, the different services that innovators need to have in order to, prosper. And in addition to that, we have really, sometimes I think, too many tools, and of course, obviously, it's difficult for the potential beneficiaries to put themselves on the map. But if you really focus on what you have to do, you can find your tools within Horizon. And my expectation is, of course, that with the ECF, so the Competitiveness Fund, even more, and you can go with your product to the market. So innovation ecosystems, use of research and technology infrastructures, which will be more prominent in the future, to have the services around, and to have the different types of partnerships that they are linking you via the network. And please allow me to say that how important this is apart from Horizon Europe, and to have the single market to be completed. I mean, we have been doing that for such a long time. But then, if you have the same rules, you are more facilitated in entering the markets, and you are not, leaving the European market, because it's simply easier in the US, for instance, be it IPR. And for instance, I would like to mention maybe later on the importance of the standards, interoperability, and the capital markets union as well, so that you can have the big tickets and you can grow within the European Union. So they are manifold initiatives to be tackled, and Horizon, it's together with the ECF, a prominent part of it in terms of funding and how you structure, these collaborations.
Massimo, from your vantage point, how do you see a program like Horizon and how it impacts or doesn't impact your business, or the opportunities for your business?
It surely is a great opportunity, and when we are looking specifically at the aerospace industry on our side, well, of course, we need to mention what we're doing on clean aviation, of course. Okay, so as part of this initiative, clean aviation is of paramount importance. Okay, for a number of reasons. First, because it's setting a perspective, okay, on what is going to happen in the future. Is aiming to define a new standard, to define a new I would even call it a new competitive leverage for our European industry into that. So this is extremely important. Second, is setting, and I'm coming back to the point, a cooperation environment between the industries. And this is done really in the right way. Cooperation and competition. You want to cooperate, but you want to make sure that you're making this in a competitive way. So, us as European industries, we are in a way cooperating and competing, okay, each other, to make sure that we will make available for the European ecosystem the best technologies that the European companies can create. So eventually, the value proposition this industry in Europe is able to generate will be the best that the European companies can create. And this is important. I think we need to always bear in mind that specific fact. Things cannot be done in isolation. It has to be part of an ecosystem. And clearly, I think initiatives such as Horizon, of course, are really to be seen in that perspective. So making available the funding and the levers to help European companies, to help the European industry in becoming more competitive, and at the same time, giving the perspective and the target to the European company to work in the right direction. And as industry, we don't have to take for granted that the funding will be there if we are not delivering the end result that everybody is expecting for. And when we're talking about end results, we're talking again about technologies, about raising the bar of our competitiveness, but also giving a return to our communities. This is, of course, a target for all of us. Returns in terms of investment we are able to directly do on the territory, and also as a lever to generate additional investment in the territory. New job opportunities, and we've been creating thousands of jobs opportunities in Europe, and I think this is, at the end of the day, one of the most important things. And again, fostering a global collaboration, not only with the industry, but also with R&D centers, with universities, and with institutions. This is really a key dynamic for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Staying with you for a moment, though, Massimo. I mean, GE is obviously GE Aerospace and GE more broadly, global companies. What does a competitive Europe look like from the perspective of a company operating across global supply chains?
That's a good one. So, a competitive Europe is a system that eventually is able to deliver to the customer in the way the customer is expecting us to do. The aerospace industry, and Avio Aero as a aerospace company, of course, is an aerospace industry, a company. It is an extremely complex environment. I use again that word cannot be taken in isolation. It cannot be considered only in the perspective of where the product is finally assembled. It is a tough supply chain, so that has to be considered. It is local and it's global, so the famous global at the same time. So, and the competitiveness of a supply chain really takes into account each single step from the conception to the design, to the development, to the production, to support of the products we're doing. And this cannot be done in a single place. This has to be done in a multiple sites and different places. Each single component, and there are 1,000 of them, can put in jeopardy the goal and the final result of what we're doing. So we need to be extremely careful, not creating unnecessary barriers to have the flow going through. So we can do many things in Europe, but we cannot do, and Bertrand was saying this before, all of the things in Europe. So we need to be very cautious in, as I say, I stress it, in not creating unnecessary burden and barriers that could be detrimental to our global competitiveness.
And Kirsi, to you then, from your commission perch and the wider discussion around Buy European and Made in Europe, how do you respond to that?
I really get you, Massimo. I think that you've framed it really well. I mean, Europe. If we've learned anything from the past few years, I think we have to know that we can't always rely on outside help. We have to trade, and we need to trade with our international partners, because we need the things that we can't produce here necessarily, and these are components, parts of the production, the value chains here in Europe. But we need to be better prepared also that we are using the European industry here to have a certain sort of a minimum safety net, I would say, in Europe, to have our own production as much as we have the resources for, and all the European value chains, they are very much integrated. So I'm coming here to the single market aspect. That single market has to work. I mean, otherwise, how are you going to, produce anything if you can't, trade across the borders within the single market properly, or you can't post your workers in another country? So the single market barriers have to be fixed. Even things like late payments. I mean, based on what we have learned in the semester work, I mean, companies are actually simply not doing cross-border trade because of their fear that they are never going to be paid. And public procurement is another element. So you need to have this sort of resilient European value chains, which are working seamlessly across the single market, so that things can work. And then it's about this cooperation, what you said. And it is cooperation between companies, but it is cooperation also between all the different stakeholders. The policymakers, companies, all the interests, and see, how we can do this together. And I think that is sometimes a bit missed, because, of course, it's me, myself, and I first. Everybody's thinking, what do I gain from this? And this is normal. But I think that businesses, you said that, you want the European best as well. And I think that is what we need to all think, that, how can we best work together? How can the companies work with national governments, with the EU, that we fix the single market barriers to help the companies operate and produce the goods and services that Europe needs to stay competitive, and that we can stay also resilient, and how can we work together? And I'm coming back again because it's a very new mechanism, the competitiveness coordination tool, and that is precisely what it is trying to do. And I've done a slogan myself, inspired by some leaders, that it's about mega, making Europe great again or greater again, because this is about working together. It's about looking at what the industry needs, what kind of investments, what kind of reforms you need, and then looking together within the Commission, the different departments, what can we do at EU level to help things work out, or if there's a barrier at national level, how can that be fixed? And then we talk to the member states. And that is, we are doing these competitiveness coordination tool pilots. Within my Directorate General, we have 3 at the moment. We have one on chemicals, one on off-site construction, and one on batteries. And there, those pilots bring together the different parties. It's a voluntary exercise, so those member states join who have an interest, and those industries join who have an interest. And then you have regional actors as well. You have also maybe some organizations there participating, and everybody is seeing what are the obstacles in Europe for example, chemicals industry, to thrive and to deliver the critical chemicals that we need as the building components for different products. And then what are the reforms to be made by whom, and what are the investments that we need that we can actually have a modern chemicals industry in the future as well. So it's a way of working. It's at the pilot stage. We've just published last week the website where you have the ongoing 9 pilots described there. But it is based on the Draghi idea. It was launched in the Competitiveness Compass, and now this is becoming a reality. So it's a way of working together. It's not a miracle solution, but I think it embodies the idea that, we have to think about Europe overall and not just individual interests at member state or national level or at EU level, but just to see what is good for European competitiveness so that we are staying resilient and strong in this current situation in the world.
So pulling together a lot of that then, a shared question for each of you would be, if competitiveness is the goal, where is the real bottleneck? Is it coordination, as you were talking about, at the EU level or more broadly across the bloc? Is it funding and prioritization, or the ability for industry to scale? Why don't we start with you, MEP Lakos?
I would say that ever since it's a very complex question, you have no simple answer to that. And we just heard about the CCT, so the competitiveness coordination tool that we have been waiting very much, by the way, also in terms of the ECF. So it's very, very complex, and just allow me to reflect very shortly on what you said. I think it's a good start because you have the sectoral approach. On the other hand, whenever we talk about innovation, and if we agree that this is needed for competitiveness and growth and productivity, then we have to go cross sectors. So then you need to have another additional layer to that. So coming back again to the question, so it's very, very complex, and of course, myself, I'm coming from the R&I side. So what I say, it's funding, and the structures. So that excellence is there in research, and we have the market perspective when we go close to the market. So it's not excellence only. It is, whether your product can be pushed to the market, whether there will be users using it. So bearing this in mind, and also to have the research infrastructures, the technology infrastructures, the different partnerships that you can orchestrate according to your needs. Also, we have to make strategic choices because money is not endless. And of course, we have a different global exposure and different types of supply chains. It's different if you have, a defense system that you would like to keep here and produce certain things in Europe, or if you have critical raw materials that you are exposed to procure to get from different sides of the world. And of course, sometimes you need to monitor, the resilience of your supply chains across the globe. So different exposures require different answers, and never forget that everything became very geopolitical nowadays, and it has effect on our ability to defend ourselves and to make autonomous choices.
Massimo?
The question is excellent, and all the excellent questions. It's not an easy one. So I would tend to align in any case to what my colleagues are saying here. It's we have to be specific. It's impossible to give an overall answer. So for my specific case, when I look at the aerospace industry is an excellence in Europe. Clearly, this is a sector where Europe is leader. And it needs to stay as such. So we need to identify and nurture the right conditions for the European aerospace industry to thrive and to remain leader in the global markets. So we need to go very deeply in the analysis of the resilience of our European aerospace industry, identifying where the vulnerabilities are and work on that. Clearly, the supply chain is one of these vulnerabilities. We already mentioned about it. We are working on. So we need to work on that. Identify those bottlenecks, identify those single points of failure, and cure them. That's what we need to do. We need to create an environment where the investment is easy to be executed. The aerospace industry, of course, attracts investment with a significant magnitude, of course, to develop new products, to develop new technologies. So rules are of fundamental importance. Clarity of rules, predictability of the environment we are investing in is essential. And it has to be like this also in the long term. When we're making an investment in this industry is not for the next 2 years. We're making an investment for the next decade, at the least I can say. So this is something we need to really take good care of. To your point, another essential part of it will be creating sovereign and autonomous technology. So we really need to work on that in a consistent frame. Creating technologies which are European technologies and serving European interests. And we are really praising this in a competitive, fully understood, and fully exploitable manner.
Thank you. Kirsten?
Oh, well, I think that others have said that it's a combination of different things, but I was just thinking that usually money is there. We have a lot of funding instruments. The question is how you find it, but there are also support networks that help companies to find that. So I think money, in a way, may not be that big an issue. You can find it if you have good ideas. Cooperation, I think, is also in principle not a problem, because I think there is a willingness to cooperate, and I think that Europe has come together with the crisis in the past, and we realize that we have to work together. For me, I think the problem would be the single market barriers. But I mean, those you have to really address. You have to fix those so that the single market works, and that then all the investments bear fruit, and that you can cooperate. So I think for me, that's the more fundamental issue. I don't remember what else you listed, but that I would say that's the
biggest bottleneck.
The biggest bottleneck at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts in the last minute or two that we have?
So we have the two big priorities, the defense and competitiveness. And if you come from one sector into the other, you tend to focus on your own. And I would like to just to say that we have to focus really on both to make the best effort, because one is about of our physical security, the other one is what we really are in Europe. So we cannot, live without each other. So it's the way of life, the way how we think of democracy, and if we don't have, competitiveness, so we don't have the money, basically, to invest in our societies, we may live, but we won't be the same as we are today.
That seems a pretty solid note to end on then.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you all for this very clear and grounded discussion. It's obviously very clear that right now the next step forward is about alignment between policy, funding, and industrial execution. And you all seem rather committed to that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now if I could invite you all to stay seated, the audience that is, we're going to be digging into supply chains, and I'd like to invite the next moderator, my colleague Federica Di Sario, to the stage.
Yeah. Thank you. Oops. So, thank you so much, Chris, and welcome to the European Industry Forum from my side as well. I'm Federica Di Sario. I'm a reporter here at the Parliament Magazine, and I'm very happy to facilitate the next conversation that we have this morning, which is going to be all about securing supply chains to strengthen Europe's resilience. So, a secure critical minerals supply chain is obviously essential to create economic prosperity, but also to create geopolitical leverage. It's something that we have realized more and more over the past few years. Recent years have also laid bare the vulnerabilities that we have in Europe. It turns out we don't have vast critical raw materials reserves. Neither we have huge fossil fuels beneath in our soils. So we need to find a strategy to secure our supply chains to make sure that we will remain competitive in the years ahead. I think there's hardly a more important topic these days, and that's why I'm very happy to invite my distinguished panelists to the stage. Together we will examine how Europe can reduce strategic dependencies, strengthen industrial competitiveness, and build, of course, supply chains that are not only efficient, but also resilient in the face of future shocks. So please join me here on the stage. I would like to call first MEP Bruno Tobac. He sits with the Socialists in the European Parliament. Hi, Bruno. Thanks for joining us.
And Democrats.
And Democrats. Absolutely. Christophe Yvetot, he's the representative to the EU and head of the United Nations Industrial Development Organizations. Christophe, thank you so much for joining us, please. We're also very fortunate to have with us Anna Maria Karjalainen. She's the head of EU Regulatory Affairs and Deputy Director General Europe at the International Copper Association. Hi, Anna Maria. Hi. Thank you. And I think we're still waiting for our fourth panelist. Yeah. And so I think he'll be a few minutes late. Tomislav Sokol from the EPP is also going to join at some point. So, Bruno, maybe I can start with you in this case. Europe is definitely no longer naive about the need to secure critical supply chains. What seemed like a new discussions a few years ago now is something that we are very used to. How do you see all these efforts that we have laid down over the past few years from a legislative point of view coming into place? where do you think we stand right now compared to a few years ago, and what's still missing?
Well, I think we're paying a lot more attention to it right now, pressed by current events, obviously, in different sectors. I don't think we have yet gotten all the acts together. We got a Critical Raw Materials Act. We are looking at the Circular Economy Act right now. We are trying to do industrial accelerating. But I think that the word ecosystem has been mentioned in the previous debate. I think we are still not paying enough attention or not taking seriously enough the concept that this is indeed dependent on an ecosystem. To give but one example, it doesn't make much sense to go scouring around for the materials that you would need for battery production, if at the same time you're not being very clear about the fact that you will be going into electrification, both for transport and for a lot of industry, because that is where the demand for those battery materials and the battery manufacturers will come from. If one isn't there, the other has no point either. And it's something in which to name the elephant in the room, China has been a lot more coherent and strategically coherent in its policy. They have really built the entire value chain from top to bottom, not in a way that I would have done it, not in a way that I say we should do it in Europe, but we do have to realize that one comes with the other. You won't have battery manufacturers if at the same time you're not going to say we're going to be selling electrical cars and only electrical cars. And you're not going to have the materials if you don't have the battery manufacturers, because one thing builds on the other. And yes, it is a transition if you have a legacy industry, but it is a transition we need to make, because producing copper, recycling copper to sell it to the Chinese, I don't think that is a very smart industrial future strategy for Europe.
Interesting points. Thanks a lot, Bruno. Christoph, turning to you then. You work for the UN Industrial Development Organization, and of course your work is to help developing countries strengthen their own industries. Based on what Bruno just said about the fact that we need to still do a lot to create a coherent strategy here in Europe, how do you see that happening around the world? Give us a little bit of a more international outlook on what we said, because this realization that we need to secure critical supply chains, we are in Europe, we discuss about Europe, but this is not just limited to Europe. This is a global problem. The US as it is too. So give us a bit of an international perspective.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. First of all, we were created because at the time we were created, countries, 173 countries, thought that industrial cooperation was important to maybe rebuild the world. And we receive from all countries of the world the industrial statistics, and we have alerted for many years that each country should have a minimum of industry for its resilience, but also industry is good jobs, and it brings also resources to the state budget that can then pay for education, health, all the infrastructure, all the things that citizens need. And we also alerted that countries which had a high level of industry shouldn't lose it, because then it creates also social unrest. And then you will see that in the US, in many countries that has lost their industries, they are in trouble now. So, but of course, if you look at each country, and of course developing countries, it's true that you have countries with immense resources, particularly in Africa, but they don't get a big share of those resources for their citizens. And with a population that is doubling every 20 years, it's not possible to have those resources going without any value addition. That every time you do value addition, you create more jobs, more qualified jobs, and you get more value. I think maybe the nickel or copper industry, you will tell me, but usually the mining is like a 10 to 20% of the value. But the highest part of the value then is on all the processing and all the other steps. So 80 to 90% of the value then goes somewhere else. So we have to find a way to work together. So this is what we recommend. We have been working with the European Union for more than 30 years. We work in 120 countries. I was happy to be invited by the Commissioner Sikela for International Partnership when there was a Global Gateway Forum last year, and we signed an agreement to together work on in Zambia, for example, to increase the local value addition on minerals in Zambia. We have also created an industrial center for increasing the capacity of locals to have all the skills that can help them enter into this industry, because what is missing sometimes you don't have the framework, sometimes you don't have the infrastructure, but you don't have also the skills locally. So then people are around, they see their resources going out away, but they don't benefit. So this is on those things. And I think the European Union is now moving the direction we were, I would say, recommending. And President von der Leyen herself, she said that it should be win-win, not anymore maybe only extracting the resources and importing them to Europe, but maybe creating a more fair value chain. It doesn't mean that Europe shouldn't keep also its industry, but maybe let's be reflexive, also long-term, because you can do some coup. But if you want to secure also Europe sustainable value chain, you have to work on and build a different partnership. And we believe, maybe as UN, but I think history has shown that if you have partners who are also benefiting, if you're really mutually beneficial, it's more solid than only imposing by force. So this is what we recommend, more industrial cooperation all along the value chain that will benefit both developing countries and Europe.
Thanks. Perfect. And we will go back to this topic of the mutually beneficial partnerships, of course, because it's really critical to the issue of critical supply chains. And now to you, Anna Maria. So we said you represent the International Copper Association. And sometimes when there is a business in the room, I always wonder, when you hear all, these discussions from policymakers about strategic autonomy, the need to strengthen critical supply chains, is there something that policymakers here in Europe still don't understand about mining, for instance, and how to best attract investments?
Thanks for that question, and thanks for having me here. Good morning to everyone. I think maybe just to start off, for those who don't know the ICA, so we represent the copper production value chain from the mining, refining to the recycling parts of that value chain, and our members operate in Europe, but also all over the world, so not only in Europe. I think I'd like to first kind of just support some of the comments that both Bruno and Chris have made. So I think, Bruno's point about needing to consider the whole value chain, that is crucial. I mean, it is a value chain and ecosystem that all parts of it need to function together for that equation to work. So I think that's crucial. So I just wanted to say that. And equally the point about making sure that it works for all the actors involved and that it's mutually beneficial, that's obviously super important. So to come back to your question more specifically, so obviously, I mean, I represent copper, but not only copper, also many other metals are essential for us to achieve many of our goals, whether it's related to decarbonization, but also we talk increasingly about resilience and security, digitalization. All these things depend on metals being there. So there is a growth in demand for these metals that we see coming up, including for copper. At the same time, we see a decline in Europe for the production of some of these metals. And I think that kind of goes to show the fact that something does need to be improved in terms of the operating conditions for these industries in Europe. And I'd pick out three things. I think the first one is that we need to have a holistic policy framework. So we do have the Critical Raw Materials Act, which is a good start, and we do have some initiatives to work on promoting our resilience in these materials. But then at the same time, we're doing many other things that contradict that objective. So I think in particular when it comes to permitting, that won't be a surprise to anyone probably who works in this area. I think there is still a lot that we need to do to make our permitting frameworks more pragmatic and implementable while still keeping high standards. And then energy, and particularly electricity, is a key thing. We've come through an energy crisis with what is going on in Iran and in the Middle East. That is, again, putting pressure on industry, and for all for copper, but also other strategic metals and minerals, we are energy intensive in the production processes, and doing more to make sure that we can facilitate access to long-term electricity contracts, for example, that is really essential to make it work for these sectors.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Bruno, back to you now. A key goal, of course, that was floated by the EU in the Parliament as well, is to create a true single market for secondary materials, to have a more predictable investment environment. How do you see this unfolding? What do you think should be the crucial pillars of this single market for secondary materials?
Well, that depends on which area and which materials, but one of the big ones, if you ask me, and what we're looking at right now is the whole single market for waste idea. Because the problem in the European Union is as soon as you label something as waste, it becomes practically impossible to transport it across borders. And that goes for obvious dangerous chemical waste where it makes sense, but it also goes for basically a discarded washing machine that is horribly difficult to transport just across the Dutch-Belgian border. And I know that for a fact from having visited a recycling facility that both reuses and recycles a lot of materials, valuable materials that are in discarded washing machines and dishwashers. And this is a very down-to-earth example, but we make it de facto a lot easier to put a lot of electronic and electrical waste that is full of precious critical materials literally on a boat to Turkey or to China, rather than keeping them here, because it's easier to put them on the boat to China than to transport them between Belgium and Holland. And so that single market for secondary materials, for recycled materials, for potentially so waste that is probably full of those, I think we really need to have a very good look at that. I'm really hoping that the Circular Economy Act that is promised will open some doors there. Of course, a lot of that is dependent on how transparent are you in collecting, labeling, and defining what is being transported. Because if every member state does it in a different way, it becomes very difficult to have mutual recognition and open borders. You cannot ask for a member state or any kind of country to accept materials and waste that is undefined. It will create a lot of resistance. So I do think that opening those borders, but doing it in a transparent way, in a simple way, it starts with collecting it sort of in the same way everywhere rather than in 27 different ways, and making sure that you can have trust in the system, reliability in the system, and then allow operators, whether it is recyclers, whether it is smelters, to indeed have access to those materials and then to reuse them and keep them here. But that is a discussion that needs to go through the whole process, and there is a lot of resistance from member states because at the bottom basic level, all those collection systems are designed to work at the local level for local authorities and local actors, and they are not necessarily aligned with each other. And so there's a big challenge, and actually a big low-hanging fruit there for the, I think, for the European Union and for making a much more unified European market. And you will create a lot of business opportunities and create volumes and create the possibility for example, circularity hubs where you can gather expertise, can gather operators, and maybe also all at the same time provide guarantees and certainty on things such as electricity supply. Because there too, for energy-intensive, especially electricity-intensive industries, and metals recycling is in many cases precisely that. You look at very solid bottlenecks in different European countries when it comes to things such as grid connections. You wouldn't be trying it in the Netherlands right now because you would simply not be able to literally plug in your installation. And so getting expertise hubs, getting those hubs and creating an area where you can develop a business, but based on the advantage of a European scale, I think is something we really need to do. And to get to Christophe's point, that obviously does not mean that we're ever going to be autarkic or 100% self-sufficient. The fact that we are trying to keep more materials in Europe and recycle them, reuse them, is not in contradiction with the fact that we will still need partners for lots and lots of stuff, and where it will even be definitely beneficial to have those partners. I don't think the ambition should ever be to become autarkic. It should be to have a strategic independence and to talk with partners on an equal basis, rather than out of dire need, which is sometimes the case right now.
Yeah. No, clear points. And Anna Maria, I'm actually curious to hear what you think of the role of circularity to achieve stronger supply chains for Europe in particular.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question. So fully support what Bruno was saying about the Circular Economy Act, waste shipments. There is a lot that can be done there to facilitate further our ability to recover and recycle critical and strategic raw materials. Maybe to add on that, so for copper and many other strategic and precious metals, e-waste is also an important source of those. And there's definitely potential to increase the collection and improve the sorting and pre-processing so that we don't lose some of these materials, such as copper, into other waste streams in a way that we can no longer recover it. And equally, I think, the single market aspect is very important. So we need to harmonize some of our standards there and make sure that we take down the barriers that exist. I mean, I think waste shipments is a very concrete example there, where we hear it all the time from our members, the tremendous difficulties and administrative issues they have with simply shipping waste around from one place to another within the EU. So, there's a lot that can be done there, and hopefully the Circular Economy Act will help us. There is a caveat, though, I think, when we talk about recycling, and obviously there's a lot that recycling is something we need to encourage, and we need to take full advantage of it and increase it, improve it. But at the same time, there are limits to the extent that recycling can fulfill our needs for these materials. So, for example, if we take the case of copper, in the EU, we're already around 50% of the copper that we're using in the EU already comes from recycling. So we're already pretty good at recycling. We can do more to improve that. But because of the fact that, on average, copper stays in the applications where it's used for around 25 years, and at the same time we expect global demand for copper to double by 2050. If you do the maths, there's just not enough stuff to recycle to meet that gap. So, we do need to continue to also mine more copper if we want to meet our needs. And, obviously there are differences for different materials in, how that plays out. So I can only really speak about copper there. But, so we really need to also have a sort of all of the above strategy to our resilience for these materials, where we look at domestic mining, processing, and recycling, but also imports.
Yeah, I think imports is going to be the crucial one, because we could see it even from the Critical Raw Materials Act. I mean, the part that we expect to obtain through domestic extraction is still quite limited. It's just 10%. And so thinking about the importance of imports in the future, I turn to you, Christophe, and I want to go back to this issue of mutually benefiting partnerships. And you mentioned before that you were part of a mission with Commissioner Sikela for global gateways in Zambia, I think. I'm curious, every time we talk about global gateways, there is this, we inevitably think about the dominance that China already has in many African countries. So what should be the European approach to establishing these new partnerships in a way that do not resemble, what we used to do in the past, and at the same time we do not, copy the Chinese way. That's just not our approach. So what's the European recipe for these partnerships?
I think it's a big opportunity for Europe. I mean, we were recommending this already many years ago, because many years ago we had already those discussions when EU started to put the list of critical materials. It's already 15 years ago, almost 20 maybe. And at that time we were telling the EU and also companies, maybe let's start to work a different way, because if you want to secure the critical raw material, maybe if you build a factory close to it and that people have jobs, etc., that will make you there forever, and you will secure. So I don't know if this has always happened, but I think now is the case that the new offer that I understand from the European Commission is exactly this partnership, that European Union will help countries add more local value, substantiate the beneficiation, we call it in Africa, add value to the product, and will create also more value for the people there, but also open new markets, because if people become to move from poverty to middle class, it's also a market for Europe. And I think together with this debate, there was also the circular economy debate. Because, of course, you need all those resources around the world, but as you said, you have so many already material that are here, and we were invited at that time when, for the first circular economy package, UNIDO was one of those co-drafters, I would say, because we are part of this multi-stakeholder consultation, and we were doing that already around the world, because it's a condition of not only industrial competitiveness, because it's about resource efficiency, it's about using better, do more with less, so it's very good for industrial competitiveness, but also necessary for preserving the environment and the climate and keeping the natural resources. So I think for many different things it's very important, and that's why together also, I would say, with this partnership, we're already building this partnership in the area of circular economy, because with the European Union we have very many projects around the world where we promote the circular economy, and making sure that not only EU tries to be the best in this, but also that we also bring countries around to also go that route, and bring maybe. People say that Europe has so many high standards and regulations, etc. But I think most of the time they go the right direction, and we would like also the rest of the world to also do the same. So through technical cooperation, funding from under the Global Gateway, what we are trying to do is to help people benefit from their own industrial activities on the ground, learn and do this the technology transfer and knowledge transfer, but also doing that with the best standards. And standards are very important in industries, the language of industry standards. And if you want to move on, circular economy, you need to have standards also. You have to have two systems to create a secondary market. Sometimes we start with the first step, but then you see that it's a full system of subcontractors, buyers, and if you don't address all of this in a holistic manner, that's why I like what you said, that all those new policies of the EU, there should be also a holistic vision, that you don't have a Circular Economy Act, Industrial Acceleration Act, and all the acts then taken in isolation. I mean, there are a lot of consultations, but at some point, if you want to achieve the right goal, you need to have this holistic vision. Thank you.
So it's not too late, coming back to China very quickly, it's not too late for us.
I mean, it's a everyday fight, I would say. It's a word is the competition. Today, you have to put yourself also at the place of developing countries. They have their needs. They have population that is increasing. The growth is not always, you need more economic growth to compensate. The economic growth should be higher than demographic growth is the basics of the economy. If the cake remains the same and you have more people to eat the cake, you will have only a small piece. And they have different partners. So who is bringing the best offer? So if you have the partners that are doing like in the past, just taking the raw material and bringing somewhere else, maybe that will continue. Maybe you can, in this space, come with a new offer that is mutually beneficial partnership. Europe not needs those resources, but maybe bringing also knowledge, technology, investing in people, helping those governments also bring benefits to their population. Maybe that's a good offer. This is an offer that as UN we would recommend and we support.
Yeah, it's true. It pushes us to be even more competitive also in the way we approach our trade partners. Bruno, now a question about domestic extraction, the need to also ramp up mining here inevitably, even if we are planning to import most of our future critical raw material needs. It's obviously very controversial. I mean, it's fine to say we want to ramp up mining, but we know that this runs counter many difficulties on the ground. I mean, I went to last year actually to visit a planned lithium mine in Czech Republic. It's supposed to be one of the biggest lithium mines. So when they talk about it in Brussels, people are very excited about it. But then I went to speak to the local population and they just didn't want it because they just came back from a past of coal mining and they wanted a future without mining at all. They just were restoring the land. They wanted to develop a spa sector, so completely different. But now Europe, Brussels has other priorities, and how do we reconcile these two legitimate needs? The fact that we need to think about our own security and the need for these people to have the economic future they wish.
Well, first of all, by realizing that we need to take both sides of the discussion seriously. And I'm more than a bit. I'm very unhappy with the way that we have been having this debate in the last year. I'm well aware that we are doing extraction in Europe right now. There is mining going on in Europe, in some places in a very good way, in some places in a slightly more controversial way. But it's not like it is impossible or it is per definition unacceptable. And yes, we will need to do it. We need to be a little bit realistic about it as well. Even if you start a project right now, something usable will start coming out of the ground in 15 to 20 years in general. So this is not about filling gaps for tomorrow. This is about the long run. And if you want to do it in the long run, you'll need acceptance. And what I'm hearing for the last year in the European Parliament, in the European debate is, let's get rid of all those horribly annoying rules such as water quality and water framework directive and just give permits to a mine because you know what, we need the lithium. You could probably give those permits you'll probably never have the mine either. Because indeed it has to be acceptable at a local level, and telling people there, sorry, we were very sorry, forget about the Water Framework Directive, forget about water quality, forget about quality of life, we need your lithium, get out of the way, because we're going to give a permit now. I think that is that's a useless way of doing it. And it's not necessary either. We can be, and that goes back to the idea of international partnerships, we should be trying to be leaders in doing responsible and let's call it clean extraction. It's not like it's impossible. It's going to be more expensive in many ways, but even the Chinese are no longer doing their worst in China. Because even in China, the extremely polluting way of extracting materials is no longer accepted by the people. They go do it in the rest of Asia, sadly, but even in China, it is no longer accepted, and it is normal that is not being accepted. The fact that you need lithium does not allow you to do just anything, and it's not even necessary. So let's try to align those things. Let's try to make sure they work together. Let's try and explain indeed, if we at least can explain it to those people, okay, we'll be doing mining, but if you look at what is happening in some places in for example, Finland and northern Sweden, it is possible to do extraction in a much more responsible way. It is possible to do extraction in an accountable way. And yes, that means that the permitting process will probably take a few years, and so be it, but at least you'll have a mine. If not, you will have a battle. And that battle will just ruin any kind of permit that you are being given. So let's bring the narrative back to the down to earth. Let's see how we can indeed do responsible extraction. Let's not expect too much about it in the very short term, because it is not a short-term project. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But let's have an honest discussion about it. You know, even in this country, there's 400,000 people in the west of Flanders right now because of problems of water pollution, in that case with pesticides, who are boiling their potatoes in bottled water. That is not a long-term acceptable situation in a European country where people accept quality of life and protection of quality of life for something essential such as drinking water. So as long if you give the impression that we don't care about it anymore, we're going to fight the Chinese on their own terms, you're always going to lose. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of energy. Let's do it right, and let's assure people that we are willing to do it right. And that's not what I'm hearing too much of the time. So let's get over that. And then, yes, we can do extraction in Europe.
Anna Maria, just wonder if you wanted to add something to this topic.
Thanks. Yeah, indeed. I mean, obviously, you know, it is in the interest of the industrial operators, whether it's mining, refining, to do a good job with the way they produce, because indeed, otherwise, you know, it's not a sustainable, industry. And if I look at, you know, what our members are doing in Europe, all of them are applying the, you know, best available techniques for reducing the emissions from their operations under the Industrial Emissions Directive, the Water Framework Directive, and so on. So, you know, they've invested hundreds of millions in the last years into improving the environmental sustainability of their operations. So they take this very, very seriously. That said, you know, earlier when I was saying that, you know, there are still things that we can do to make permitting more pragmatic. I think, for example, the Water Framework Directive is an example where, you know, there's huge differences in how member states implement it.
That's true.
And in some instances, you know, our members have had tremendous difficulties because of the fact that, for example, you might have background concentration levels in the water bodies before you even start your operation that are above the thresholds that are allowed. And in such a case, you know, it can take, you know, incredible investments to achieve very little improvement, and where actually you're not responsible for the background levels that were there, which might be also for geological reasons, because you have copper in the ground in that place, so you have more copper in the water as it is. So, you know, it's quite complex, And I think, we need to be pragmatic and reasonable in the way that we do that if we want to have these operations happening in Europe in the future. And for copper, we actually do have some really good potential to increase mining in Europe and some good projects that could do that. Maybe just for a minute to come back to, Christoph, what you were saying about global partnerships. And, I was also saying earlier that, we need to have an all of the above strategy where we look at, we look at increasing the mining, but also we look at the processing, the recycling, and the imports. So all of it has to go together. For the imports, I think one thing where the EU really needs to improve is the financing part. Because we do see that there's a huge discrepancy between what we're able to do, whether it's the EU or member states, and what other parts of the world are doing. And I think, hopefully under the next multi-annual financial framework, we'll also maybe have more capabilities to do that. But, one of the things there that I think is crucial is, for example, help in de-risking projects in countries where private investors may not be willing to go otherwise. So, I think that, that's one area when it comes to, trying to improve, secure offtake from third countries. That's one area I think where we really need to work more.
Perfect. Thank you. We just have 1 minute left, but I was wondering if the audience has a question for our panelists. Is there a question? No. Very shy this morning. Okay. Then I would ask each one of you to maybe end with a last thought or something that we really need to remember when we talk about securing critical supply chains. We can start with the last one, Anna Maria.
Okay, so I think my key takeaways will be, first of all, we need a holistic, all of the above sort of strategy and approach. To make it work, we need competitive and affordable electricity, low carbon, obviously, and we need a more pragmatic approach to permitting.
Christoph.
Yeah, thank you. So to do all of this partnership, we have created a global alliance on responsible and green minerals. So we try to bring both the countries that import and those who export, to work on 4 things. One is local beneficiation. Second, create a sustainable value chain, secure value chains. Third is really also to have fair contracts with the mining companies. And the third is really to increase the cooperation and the financing. And I think we believe really in this partnership that we have with the European Union and with developing countries. As I said, the president herself, von der Leyen, she recommended, she was pushing for this mutually beneficial partnership, and I think that's the way to go. Dialogue and partnership is the way to go for Europe, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Bruno?
Well, I would say just one thing. I think that we have to be very careful about going for cherry picking in trying to fix one thing that will solve it all. It is indeed a whole value chain, and if you cannot convince people that you have a plan or a strategy, neither the population nor businesses nor investors nor member states are gonna align in that. And so don't think that there's just one thing, whether it's permitting or whether it's recycling or whether it's, none of them by themselves are gonna solve it. You need a coherent vision, and to cite Mark Carney, just hope is not a strategy.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a great conversation. Please join me in a round of applause. Hello and welcome back. For those who were not here before, my name is Federica Di Sario, and I'm a reporter here at the Parliament Magazine. And I'm very happy now to be conducting this conversation with my excellent panelists. So this session will revolve around all things global trade, and this is a topic that even if you wanted, you couldn't have escaped over the past year. So there's no hiding that Trump's aggressive trade agenda started last year has pushed the European Union to an inflection point, and that's something that we are still wrapping our head with, trying to understand what's the next direction for the EU, which usually historically has been such a staunch defender of free trade. And now we're trying to find a way in between economic security on the one side, and on the other, of course, is still going to be maintaining good relationships with our trusted trade partners. And that's to explore these kind of conversations and questions that I'm here with my panelists. Please join me in welcoming. So we have Aitor Montesa Lloreda. He's Deputy Head of Unit of South and Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand at DigiTrade. Hi Aitor, thanks for being with us. We also have Elena Suarez Sanchez. She's the head of the Brussels office at the International Trade Center. Hi Elena.
Thank you. Hi.
We are joined as well by Martin Kempf. She's an MEP who sits with the EPP. Hi, Martin. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. And also here next to me, Tananchon Rokitikun. He's Minister Counselor for Commerce from the Embassy of Thailand.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So that's, as I said, I think it's a pretty exciting topic because every day we see something new, and it's also a moment where our academic framework and the way we think about global trade is being reshaped day by day, also by the practice. Aitor, I want to start with you. Obviously, from you represent the Commission here, and the Commission is the one that represents the EU and clinches global trade agreements. So, it's very hard to sum up what has happened since last year. But one thing is clear: it's this diversification push that we have had in our trade agenda since Trump forced us to, to observe the fact that our most trustworthy trade partner no longer was such. So we had to find new partners or deepen relations with other partners. Can you tell us, can you just paint a picture for us of where we stand with this diversification push, what's been done, what's missing, what gives you hope?
Well, thank you very much first for the invitation, Federica, and for the words. I just wanted to say something about building a relation with trusted partners. Yeah. Having a good relation with trusted partners, we certainly want that. We also want to have good relations with less trusted partners. And I think we should take this into account, because what we're trying to do is to reconfigure, to reposition ourselves in a world that is changing fast and is changing in a way that is challenging the DNA of the European Union, because we are a community of law. And we are, I wouldn't say that we are not equipped, but we are, this is where we thrive. And we are in a situation where there is an escalation of geopolitical tensions. And there is a contest between different powers that is more based on power and on sometimes even on coercion than on rules. And that has moved the table. And I don't say this because we are helpless. I say this because we need to adapt. And we need to adapt. First, because the world is not going to change according to our wishes, but we can change, we can shift the place we have in the world according to our wishes, but also according to our strengths. And we have many strengths. And one of the strengths that we have, besides the internal market, which is something in itself, besides our international position as trade partners, we are the first trading bloc in the world. We are the only bloc, I think, that is both a net exporter of services, investment, and on trading goods. And we have been, I think we are seen by many trading partners as a reliable source of stability in a world where stability is needed, because stability is behind investment, is behind trade decisions, investment decisions, enterprise decisions. And there are many things that we are trying to do in order to position ourselves in this moving world. I'm just going to deal with one of those, which is our trade diversification agenda. But I need to say why we are doing this, because we can no longer do things as we were doing before. I think economic security is playing a central role in the trade agendas of many trading partners, also of the European Union. And we have to adapt to that. That means that we cannot consider that efficiency alone is the only leitmotif of our external action. But efficiency is still important, and it's still important because we should not forget why we are doing this. We have 700,000 companies that directly depend on our exports for their survival. That's supporting 30 million jobs in Europe. It's 1/3 of our industrial output that is sold abroad. So there is no choice but to take into account efficiency and diversification, while we are losing market access in certain countries because of the tensions, the geopolitical tensions. And we are also losing security of inputs that we need in order to sustain our economy, because we have seen that this has been weaponized in the past. We need to diversify both. We need to make sure that we have new business opportunities abroad, both for exports and for imports. And we need to do it in a place where not everyone is willing to partner with us. But there are many that want to do it. We have the largest network of FTAs in the world. With the new agreements that we have in the pipeline, this will probably go to 54% of our total trade, and that's 48 partners. Within this Commission's mandate, we have concluded trade agreements with Mexico, with Mercosur, with India, with Indonesia, and with Australia. And we hope within this mandate to conclude with the Philippines by September this year, if everything goes well. Malaysia and Thailand would also be concluded by 2027. We don't know the date yet. We are exploring the possibility to open negotiations with Bangladesh if they are ready to meet our level of ambition. And we are going to conclude probably this week our negotiations with 4 African, Southern and Eastern African countries in the context of the ESF4 agreement. I'm speaking too much. Maybe just to, this is something that we can develop in the questions. Why we think this is important? I spoke before about our place in the international context, but also because these trade agreements are essential for our competitiveness. And they are not essential just, these are not just nice words, this is backed by data. I'm not going to enter into that, but we can develop later if you are interested. In the areas where we have FTAs, we have seen that our market share has been kept or even increased, whereas it has decreased dramatically in the places where we don't have those agreements, and the biggest winner has been China. There are several examples of this, and this is only normal because China went from something around, well, now it's basically 30% of global output for industrial products, and in 2030 it can be 45%. So we need to have a strategy that secures our place in the world the way we have done in those agreements.
Thanks, Saitor, and we'll definitely get back to China later. I just have a very brief follow-up to you. Is there any update on the EU joining the CPTPP? Because that was a big priority item according to Commission President von der Leyen.
Well, she did not say that this is a priority for us to join the CPTPP. What is a priority is to cooperate with the CPTPP. We are cooperating with a number of middle powers in order to stabilize the situation in the WTO. This is important for us. This is part of our strategic objectives. But we do have free trade agreements with many CTP partners. I mean, we have trade agreements once we conclude, we ratify the agreement with Australia, we will have with Australia, with New Zealand, we have with Japan, we have with the UK. We will have, at the end of this negotiating process, we will have trade agreements with almost every CPTPP partner, and negotiating with them as a bloc would probably not bring us anything new. But we are working with them on many fora in order to strengthen our bilateral engagement so that we can agree on specific projects, we can agree on specific issues, and we also can cooperate in the WTO to try to revive the organization.
Perfect, thank you. Martin, I'd like to turn to you. So, as a lawmaker, you've contributed to negotiations over a number also of trade agreements. Is there, so first of all, how do you look at the progress made by the EU since last year in terms of diversification, what we just discussed about? And also, do you think there is a sort of lesson, takeaway that we can take from the way global trade is being reshuffled these days in terms of how you should approach it? Is there a new realization within the Parliament about how we need to approach the global trade agenda?
I think diversification was already like a clear key word said by the former speaker. And I think the global approach is more also on seeing that we need to get more resilient and more competitive, and trade is one way to be more competitive, more resilient, to have back with the diversification also the autonomy in some way with having more free trade partners. So I think we became more open in the geopolitical situation that we have right now to find new partners, and look for more partners and being more open to negotiate and to try out new paths to find common ground, and being more focused also on the economic side, on the competitiveness, on diversification. So seeing more opportunities than just being too picky on values and integrating those also important points, but still also having more the focus also on that economic side.
So a bit more pragmatic. You think we have become a bit more pragmatic?
Definitely, and I think it was also needed to become, again, a little bit more pragmatic, as we were too much relying on some partners and maybe forgot a little bit about diversification. And right now we are just like moving on and also not seeing only trade, but also moving to the digital trade, because there we are also starting to having digital trade agreements, which is also very important, because yes, we can trade on the markets with goods and investments, but the digital part is also an important point where we were just lacking in the last years. But now we are also seeing there the opportunities and going on.
What do you refer to exactly?
For example, the digital trade agreement we did with Singapore, that was the first one of that kind, and I think we have to go on also with digital trade.
That's a good point, definitely. Tananshan, so you're the Minister Council for Commerce at the Embassy of Thailand, and I was checking to see what's the state of relationships, the trade relationships between the EU, and I was really surprised to find that the EU is Thailand's fourth largest trading partner, so quite important. I was wondering, has what happened last year, so this economic coercion from Mr. Trump to us, but also to you, to basically everyone, has this changed the way how Thailand looks at the EU as a trade partner?
Let me just go back a little bit, because I think, as you mentioned, Thailand, EU trade relation has always been there. You're the fourth largest investors in Thailand, with more than 2,000 companies in Thailand at the moment, and I think the situation with the the US hasn't actually changed the direction of the relationship between Thailand and the EU, but I think we perhaps a little bit more focused and want to upgrade that relationship somewhat. I just like to call it evolving relationships. I think with the EU policy in terms of the strategic autonomy, with the trying to diversify the supply chain, increase competitiveness, as well as remain true to the EU value. I think the core message, I think, for the EU is to try to find that balance, as well as for Thailand, looking from our perspective. We have always been, the EU, for most of the investors or maybe the business in Thailand, the EU has always been, although it's very important, but for some of us have always almost elusive with all the standards and everything. But at the moment, with the evolving situation, I think Thailand is a bit more ready and want to become part of that supply chain to support the EU. Since let me just go back a little bit more when the first Thai-EU negotiation was started in 2013, I think, and I was involved with the Department of Trade negotiations, where we have these activities where we go around and have public consultations, industry consultations. We have always painted the picture that EU is the high standard, the gold standard of the international trade, and the eventuality of us lifting ourselves to become that level is always important. I think timing now is the right timing, where as Aito mentioned, that diversification is key, and Thailand is trying to lift ourselves to match that level. Mm-hmm. So I think it's as I go back to my first comment, is that the relationship is always there, but what is important now is to try to lift, making Thailand being a strategic partner of EU, and also integrate ourselves into the supply chain of the EU, which is the way forward, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. And if I understand correctly, so we are soon gonna have a trade agreement with Thailand.
Hopefully, yes. The negotiation is ongoing. The 9th round of the negotiation is at the end of this month in Brussels, and hopefully, again, as Aito said, we will try to conclude everything. Yeah. Perhaps the mandate has always already placed to us by our executive that within the end of this year we should have a trade agreement with the EU. So hopefully. Okay,
fingers crossed then. Elena, to you now. You represent the International Trade Center. So I want to go back to the bigger picture and really have your perspective to tell me what you think is your diagnosis of what happened in the EU. How was the response to the trade turmoil that was initiated last year, and what you think would be the most beneficial response in your view?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity and for having me here with all these great panelists. I think that indeed there were several wake-up calls for the EU in the last months or years, but I think the very big one was with the imposition of tariffs by the US president. This, I think, really triggered the EU to really progress with its trade agreements and try to finalize a number of them. And Aitor has explained very well the diversification push of the EU with all these agreements that were actually on the pipeline for a while, and this year has been signed, like Mercosur, India, etc., that were negotiated for many, many years. Perhaps I would like to make 2 points. The first one is that I think it's a great strategy that the EU is following with this diversification strategy, trying to sign trade agreements with a number of different partners, not relying only on the big ones. So the point I want to make is that this is great, but now comes a lot of work, which is implementing all these agreements. It's not just the negotiations, but now comes really, awareness raising among companies, especially SMEs, so that everyone really benefits from all these agreements. And we have seen in the past that the preferential utilization rate of companies really using those preferences has not always been taken up, especially by SMEs. We know that in agreements like India, we will be having challenges with, for example, rules of origin, so we need to really work. And I was working before for an important European trade association, so I know the importance of communicating well on all these agreements so that not only big companies benefit, which is important as well, but also smaller ones. So this is the first point. And the second point I wanted to make, besides trade agreements, is important to use other tools that we have at our disposal, and an important one is also Global Gateway. This is a powerful strategy that we can also use to try to diversify our trade relations as well, and our value chains. There are many regions with which we have FTAs, but not with all of them, and we can also use a Global Gateway for that. I think that Global Gateway started several years ago. It took quite a few years to really take off. I think that now it has improved a lot. The point I would like to make is that for Global Gateway to really turn the political ambition into investable projects, we need to look we need to look into mobilizing the private sector as well as SMEs. And for doing that, it's not only about the financial de-risking, which Global Gateway is very much about, giving guarantees to companies to go to all these countries. It's also about the non-financial de-risking, which I really want to emphasize, because companies will only go to some of these countries. Some of them are fragile countries where companies need to go, for example, to source critical raw materials, if they really have the assurance that the enabling environment in those countries is really conducive to doing business there. And for that, we need, it will require investment facilitation, strong local institutions on the ground, technical assistance, skill development, and a predictable business environment, working with local institutions there. For example, investment promotion organizations in those countries that help our companies when investing there as well. So these were the two points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Some clear points. Thanks, Elena. I turn now back to you. I want to pick up where we left. You started to mention China, and that's obviously the elephant in the room whenever we talk about global trade and Trump and the tariff saga that we observed over the past year was, according to some, a distraction compared to what the real problem is, at least in economic terms, for our industry, our competitiveness, our capacity to project ourselves in the future. And so I want to have your view on this. So there has been some talk lately in trade circles about the need for a new trade defense tool, something that would be called like a resilience tool, maybe. And this is going to be discussed by leaders at the G7. It's going to be discussed by the European Council later this month. So I want to hear from you. First of all, do you think that we need a new trade defense tool to address the unique threat that's posed by China? And if so, what kind of characteristics should this new trade defense tool have? Thank you. Not an easy question, but...
Not an easy question, because it's not an easy situation, but it's not a situation for which we are helpless either. Mm-hmm. So what I was saying before is that China today has roughly 1/3 of the industrial output of the world. and its consumption is about 13%. So there's a huge imbalance. And most estimates consider that by 2030, they would have around 45% of industrial output in the world. So almost 1/2 of all the industrial capacity will be in China. And this is not something that comes out of the clouds. This is something that is fueled by a very specific industrial policy that is very inefficient. China has 6 times the level of subsidies that we have in the European Union in relation to the revenues of the companies. And I could say that there is a perception, I don't know to what extent that, I mean, it's too long to develop here, but there's a perception that the current structure in the WTO does not contain its behavior. But we do have a number of tools in the European Union. We have TDA investigations that have, in 2025, reached record levels for China, also in 2024. It's an unprecedented number of TDI investigations, and they work. We also have more novel instruments. We have the foreign direct screening, direct investment screening, foreign subsidies regulation, the IPI. We launched the first IPI case last, I think it was in 2025, on medical devices. So we have a toolbox of measures that can actually address some of the issues that China is creating in the European Union. But all that is the protective side of this question. What I was saying before is that what we have seen is that our trade agreements, they change the situation on the ground when they exist. And I give you just 2 examples. In South Korea, the Chinese share has exploded, and the Japanese share fell down by 5 entire points. So not 5%, but 5 points altogether. And we went from 9 to 11%. So we kept and increased our market share. To take Latin America, and it's a huge continent, well, a huge part of a continent, and in the areas where we have FTAs, we have maintained our market share. And that's Chile, Mexico, Central America, Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador. In Mercosur, we went from 30% in 2000 to 20% now. So it's a huge reduction, where China went from 5% to 30%. And our modeling says that we could revert that trend. We could actually increase 10 points in Mercosur, and China, of course, will reduce a little bit. If you go to India, it's the same thing. In India, we had 30% market share in 2000. Now we have, 20%. We roughly have now 8%. And China went from 4 to 16%. And our modeling says that with the new trade agreement, we will match what China is doing. So one way of addressing the, I don't know how you want to put it, the China shock is to diversify and to compete on equal terms with China and with other countries in the places where we don't have clear and stable rules. And that's something that we are trying to do also.
And so just a quick follow-up, do we need a new trade defense tools also? Because you were talking about making sure that we have enough market shares abroad, we keep them or even increase them through free trade agreements. But how do we protect our own domestic consumption?
I think this needs to be seen. I don't think the Union will, I hope, it will not become protectionist because it's not the right policy. So we are not here to protect a business, but we are here is to create a level playing field. But there are issues of level playing field. We have to address them in a forceful manner. And there are issues of level playing field that we are dealing with. If you are asking me, do we need to do more in order to level the playing field? Maybe. This is something that, I mean, we are doing several things. We are in the Industrial Accelerator Act. We are taking action about a number of issues that we see in our market, also because of resilience questions, etc. We will have to reform the public procurement directives, and when we reform the public procurement directives, we will have to see whether there are issues of level playing field that need to be taken care of. I don't want to anticipate anything. What I'm saying is that this is not a matter of protectionism. We should not enter into that, and we should never forget. I mean, if you take certain sectors, the part of those sectors that we are that are consumed in the European market is a fraction of our industrial capacity. If you take the railway sector, for instance, I mean, we can protect the railway sector in Europe, but 50% of all trade in the world in railway stock comes from the European Union. So we have to make sure that we have the competitive position that we need in the world, and that we have the level playing field rules that are needed so that our companies don't suffer here, not because of competition issues, but because they are not competing on the same terms.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Martin, maybe on the same topic to you, because of the China shock, as I call it, what do you think? So first of all, he also mentioned all the toolbox that we have in terms of trade defense tools. Same question, like, do we need something more, or do we need a better use of this toolbox?
I think to add maybe on what you said, the recent safeguards do rely to the overcapacity on steel is an example of a safeguard we are doing, which is still WTO compatible, and trying to find that balance between not being protectionist, but still having in mind that we need our steel industry in Europe, that we need our made in Europe steel, and then there is not that fair level playing field in that area, and that we try just to find that balance again in how we can also make our European industry again more competitive in a way that what are we seeing now in the steel sector is also that we are pushing for green steel. We are pushing to be more sustainable. But at the same time, there are other countries who are having an overcapacity, being able to sell their steel very cheap on our open market. And then there is not the level playing field. So we need to find that tool who is helping to create somehow that level playing field, which is not there by nature. So I think what you said, it's quite accurate to not fall into that protectionism, still being that open, because that openness also makes the relation in both directions really important for us, because we also don't want to only produce the steel in Europe for the European market, but we also have an interest to export our European steel to other partners. So there I see the big balance to find in the different sectors what's appropriate and what's the situation we need to react on, or are we always in need to react on the situation?
Okay. Thank you. Elena, to you now. I think this begs even bigger questions. Ida mentioned, and Martina as well, the need in many occasions to be WTO compliant, which is being described as a sort of constraint also for acting more forcefully. At the same time, we've stated many times that the EU has its own interest in keeping a rule-based trade order. We don't want to just live in a world where the big power gets it all. So the question to you is, how do you see the role of the WTO? And also what Ida mentioned, the WTO in the way it is designed doesn't really allow for this industrial dominance that's being represented by China right now. So is there a way to keep the WTO while trying to react to the big China problem that we have?
Yeah, this is not an easy question for me to answer, but perhaps something to mention that is important is that despite the growing fragmentation in the world, which we certainly agree with, still around 72% of global trade still takes place on WTO terms. So the system is under pressure, no doubt, but it's not disappearing. And I think it's important to keep the WTO functioning as it is, with the basic agreements that you have there that are also quite useful, by the way, and trying to reform it, of course. I have to admit that MC14, the last ministerial conference that took place in Cameroon, was quite disappointed, I may say, because it didn't really tackle the issues of reform. But I think we should not give up. I think that the WTO, in a way, is also in the DNA of the EU, which is one of the guarantors of multilateralism. And I think the EU should continue to push for WTO reform. I don't think it's still lost. There are also other ways to find agreements around the WTO. You have plurilateral agreements with certain like-minded partners and other ways around it as well.
Perfect. And now to Tanan. So yesterday was at this briefing, and we were discussing about China, and with the latest numbers that were very alarming, and basically really sending this alarm to the EU that we need to do something now. One of the people I was speaking to, one of the researchers, mentioned the fact that one idea would be to many countries, not just the EU, to act in a unified way, to a little bit what Carney was saying about the middle powers teaming up. And so all the countries that have this problem with China or capacity, then teaming up together. How likely do you think it is for a country like Thailand to envisage this kind of new geopolitical configuration in which maybe you team up with the EU and other countries to face this issue? Because this is not just our problem, but it's affecting everybody's industrial base.
Sure. Yeah. I'd just like to give an example from Thailand's point of view. As I was mentioned earlier, that, and again, so there's the panelists that level playing field, diversifications, competitiveness. Looking from Thailand perspective, I think we would like to be a trusted partner of the EU, where some initiatives have already taken place from our side. Let's just say, from my note, the EUDR, for example, we have the Rubber Authority of Thailand, where they have embraced the EUDR and successfully mapped the GPS boundaries for more than 90% of the estimated rubber plots in Thailand. And it's with 1.6 million smallholder farmers, have been registered and controlled, mandated put in the database. So that means we are embracing the policies of the EU, and we also have developed the central data system for the rubber trading system, and also which result in us being designated as a low-risk country under the EUDR, which shows under the right circumstances, Thailand is always a team player. We always want to support what's going on in the global market, and at the same time, we also need a little bit of help from the European Union as well, in terms of, again, Elena has already mentioned the global gateway, and which doesn't have to be the least developed countries. Thailand may be one of those countries where those sort of funding can be useful in bringing up our local industry and help improve our infrastructure, where some of the local producers can be beneficial and enter into the supply chains of the EU in the long term.
And my question, so that's super interesting, but specifically to China,
okay.
I also saw that Thailand has an enormous trade relationship with China. I believe it's your first partner. But at the same time, also, you're starting to importing more, and they're starting to import less from you. So do you also see and feel this China problem? And would you envisage like doing something in the same way that the EU is trying to protect its own industries?
Well, obviously, China is a big force in the global market, and we do have some policies where, at the moment, I think one of our main measures is called a foreign business sector, where we are going dive into the where we looked at the investment from China that's coming to the country, and we try to clear up some of the what shall we say, the illegal businesses which are in terms of using the local businesses as a representation of China, and not just China but also other countries as well. And we are trying to sort that out ourselves. But then again, China is also a very important partner of a trade partner of Thailand. We try to find the right balance of that, and also again using our past experience with them, and as well as perhaps EU in the future to perhaps coming in and help us in the area.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm afraid we ran out of time, but please join me in this round of applause for our speakers. Thanks a lot. And for the audience, please remain seated, because we are going to have 20 minutes of fireside chat with MEP Jørgen Barbon from the EPP. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi.
And
Hi.
We're going to do directly. Qualcuno può prenderla? Hi. Hi. Thank you. Okay. Relatively smooth transition. Yeah. So you're the rapporteur you've been the rapporteur for the Sustainability Omnibus, and so one of the biggest simplification pushes that the European Parliament has done so far. So I would like to talk about that, but also you have a second hat, which is you're part of the INPA committee, so the International Trade Committee. So we'll also have a second part of the discussion that's going to be precisely about what we discussed a bit now, so the big changes that we are experiencing in global trade. So it's great that you've been with us also for the previous panel, so that we can make some references and comments to what we just said. But first, Sustainability Omnibus. So that's been quite, I used to be just a climate reporter, so the Sustainability Omnibus has been quite controversial for civil societies, for NGOs, who have been warning about the risk of deregulation. Why do you think that we are at this point in time that actually simplification should be the priority?
It's been quite controversial among businesses as well, in the sense that the original CSRD and CSDDD created a lot of bureaucracy for businesses. A bureaucracy that cost businesses a lot of money, and that money was taking away from actual investments in sustainability, because they had to do admin work, they had to do reporting. And what the Commission's proposal was about, and ultimately the proposal we worked with in the Parliament and we gained a majority for, was to reduce the administrative burden but keep the target of reducing emissions. And I think we succeeded in that. Indeed, it is the piece of legislation in the European history that has cut the most reporting costs for businesses. Reporting cost. but we still have the 2050 target of being climate neutral. So we reduced administrative burden, we reduced the paperwork, and we freed a lot of money that could go into investment of real sustainability issues.
Yeah. See, like that, it makes like it looks like a win-win. But let me play devil's advocate once more. Some say that Europe's competitiveness problems also have a lot to do with the energy costs, or maybe with the rising competition from outside the bloc. I mean, we just spoke about China and the fact that they are subsidized 6 times the EU. So how much of a competitiveness boost can we actually expect from these cuts in sustainability reporting?
No, I think you're right. Well, what the sustainability reporting, or this specific piece of law, the first omnibus, it cut about 5 billion euros annually for businesses. Quite a lot of money, 5 billion annually, but it will not do the trick in order for Europe to come back to competitiveness. We need to do much more things. And you, of course, you're mentioning 2 of them, the energy situation and the international trade, the competition that we see so far. On the energy side, the issue is that Europe became much too dependent on Russian gas. There are 2 problems with Russian gas. It's Russian and it's gas. And gas, of course, from a sustainability point of view, it's better than oil, but it's worse than nuclear. And when we had to remove the gas from Russia, or are in the process of removing the gas and oil from Russia, it means that we have a supply choke. We have less supply in the European market, and that means that you will have higher prices. And we have 4 or 5 times higher prices in Europe than in US, for example. And of course, that is for an energy-intensive business, that means that you're not competitive. That means that the European businesses need to find that energy elsewhere, meaning moving their factories elsewhere, or see that their investments will be happening elsewhere. And that's very, very, very bad for Europe. And that's why we need to build much more production. Yes, we need to build solar. Yes, we need wind. Yes, we also need nuclear. We need a nuclear program to roll out all over Europe as soon as possible, so that we can replace that dependency of the Russian energy sources, be more self-dependent on energy. So that's one of the most important parts. I think also we need to work on the financing thing. Companies, they start here, they scale a bit, but then when they really need a lot of external capital, they end up in the US and become US companies instead. And that's why the European Savings and Investments Unit will be so important to free a lot of capital from private citizens going into businesses in Europe.
Yeah, there are a lot of elements that are connected. Of course, simplification alone won't make Europe competitive again. That's not going to happen.
It's very important, though. It's one of the things. So don't disregard it. We have to keep that agenda and push that agenda. It's one of the simplest things we can do that doesn't cost taxpayers any money. It's just shaping the legislation in a much better way. And we need to do it. And remember, 5 billion, I said 5 billion was the savings we did with the first omnibus. And the Commission target is 37.5 billion annually by the end of this mandate.
And indeed, let's talk about that, because we focus on the sustainability one, because you've had such an important role in shaping this simplification initiative. But if we look at the broader simplification push by the administration of von der Leyen, where do you think that things are right now? What do you think that we should still do? Like, what's the timeline?
So we are almost half into this mandate. As I said, 37.5 billion is the target for this mandate. We have seen 10 omnibus packages, adding up to 15 billion. 15 of 37.5. So we're not even at 50% of the target. and we're halfway through. The first omnibus was very controversial, as you said, but we need to have a lot of more proposals from the Commission in the same direction so that we, for real, cut the cost for businesses. I also, if I may, I also am pushing for, we have this one in, one out principle. We have it since 2022, meaning that for every cost that is added when a Commission proposes something, the Commission also commit themselves to deduct the same amount of cost, one in, one out, when it comes to administrative burden. But that is not enough, because we have been building administrative burden for our businesses, not least the SMEs, for decades. So we need to reduce it. And that's why I'm pushing for the one in, two out principle. For every euro the Commission adds, they have to find another measure that deducts 2 euros.
I'm sure the companies will be up for it, but it also seems quite tricky to track, no?
Actually, the Commission is already doing it.
Okay.
It's kind of easy, because if you do an impact assessment, which we have an agreement that all legislations should be accompanied by an impact assessment. In that impact assessment, you do a cost and benefit analysis, and one part of that cost and benefit analysis, of course, is to calculate the cost of that piece of legislation. And then at the end of the year, you add up the costs and and how much you deduct. And that's what the Commission is doing in their annual burden survey, and it seems like it works. The problem is that the Commission does not want to commit to one in, two out. They commit to one in, one out, but not to actual deduct with this measure. But I've continued to push for it, and in the plenary in, I think it was January, maybe February, we gained a majority in the chamber for the one in, two out principle, which is very good news for businesses. Very good news for hardworking people in businesses, because, of course, businesses creates the jobs for the workforce there, and we need to cut more cost for businesses in order to come back to competitiveness. And hopefully now the Commission will listen to the Parliament, since we have gained a majority for it.
Okay, so next battle to watch, one in, two out. I was about to say the opposite.
No, yeah. No, that's the next battle. And I cannot understand why the Commission is so hesitant. I mean, now this is about cost, but only think about this. If we do harmonization, meaning that we go from 27 different national laws to one, that's in a sense 1 in, 27 out. So why can't the Commission even commit to 1 in, 2 out?
Okay. Great. And now let me turn to the other topic, to the other expertise of yours, which is international trade. You've played a key role in shaping the Turbo deal, the so-called Turbo deal, so the EU-US trade deal, and in particular in shaping the Parliament's position. I saw that you were the one who proposed the sunrise clause. For instance, which unfortunately didn't make it to the final version of the trade deal that was agreed by the trilogue just a few weeks ago. How do you look back at this all tariff saga and what you accomplished through also very ferocious negotiation from the Parliament and your determination to keep your role? To make the Parliament's role very important. You know, you gave quite crucial input that really shaped the final deal. How do you look at it?
So this is an industry forum where we try to discuss how we can improve the situation for European industry, right? And one of the things that I've learned with a lot of dialogue with the European businesses is that they need the relationship with the US. So what has been guiding me is to see what is best for Europe in this position. I don't necessarily like the Turnberry deal, to be honest. It's not a fantastic deal from a European perspective, but you have to measure that against the alternative. And I'm quite certain that the alternative would be much worse for businesses and for workers in Europe. Why? Because the alternative would not be status quo. The alternative would be higher tariffs and even a trade war with the US in a time where we have a proper war on European soil. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, of course. And we need the US in that proper war, and to have a trade war with them at the same time would be not very good for our security, not very good for our prosperity, and that's why I tried to do everything we could to push through this not very good deal, but still, under these circumstances, the best deal we have. I thought the process was a bit too slow, to be honest. We could have improved it. There were some hiccups, and those hiccups we put on the Trump account, I would say. The Greenland issue and a number of other issues that upset us hugely, of course. But we could also have acted a bit faster. And it was stalled in the parliament, and no one wanted to act, and that's why I came up with a sunrise clause to move things in the parliament, which it succeeded, and that's why after that we created the position of the parliament. It moved on to the trilogues. The sunrise clause didn't survive. I don't care about that. That wasn't the most important part. The important part was to push the deal through. And was it yesterday or the day before? We voted it in the Inter committee with a huge majority, and I think it will have a majority again with quite a huge majority in the plenary next, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, perfect. And I want to have your assessment of a theme that has emerged in the previous panel as well. You know, everybody's talking about this very delicate balance that we need to reach between protecting our interests, economic security, this new direction of travel that Europe has to embark on, and at the same time, the need to remain, open to our trade partners to continue protecting this idea of free trade and WTO. And I think, you come from Sweden, you're experiencing this rethinking of the global trade model on your skin, because Sweden is also has historically been one of the fiercest defenders of free trade, and yet I think that even Sweden now has come to admit that we need to approach it a bit differently. So how do you look at it?
That's a broad question. But first of all, so I'm a free trader. I like free trade. I like more free trade agreements. I don't like tariffs. I think politicians should involve themselves as little as possible in the market as possible. Still, there will be some need, of course, to regulate, but at little as possible. I think the WTO is really important, but it's at a very fragile situation. The WTO, of course, setting the international rules, and we base all of our free trade agreements on the rules of WTO. So it's important not only for the trade we do with the rest of the world, but also with our free trade partners. Now, we had a ministerial meeting in Cameroon a couple of months ago. It wasn't a success. It was rather a failure. And it's very problematic for European businesses, because that would give some kind of stability that does not exist in this very turbulent time. We failed with two things. One of the things was to have a reform of the WTO, which is much needed to modernize the situation, to make sure that we can have better decision-making in WTO. But what was even worse is, because this has happened before, we didn't agree about this, but what happened this time was a step backwards, in the sense that we have had an agreement since 1998 or 1999 on the e-commerce moratorium. Mm-hmm. That is not to impose any tariffs on electronic transitions. And now this lapsed. We couldn't have an agreement on this, which goes to, now we are in a situation where we might have tariffs on these kind of digital products or services that are so important and part of the important growth. So this has to be sorted. It's very important for us. At the same time, in WTO, we have China there. Well, China there since beginning of 2000s, and they are not acting so they are defining themselves as a developing countries. And that gives them some preferential treatment. And I think this is totally nuts, to be honest, how you can define yourself as something, and then you could get those preferential treatments. Now, China, after some pressure, have said, okay, we are prepared in all the agreements we have in the future to not have the preferential treatments of our status as a development country. Good. The problem is we cannot agree on anything in the WTO, so any future agreements will be, well, I hope there will be agreements, but at the moment it seems it's very tiny bit of their of the business. So I call on China to actually also commit to that commitment on not using the preferential statement on historical deals as well. Then we could have a change that would mean something. That would be much better for the international rules-based system and for the world as such.
What happens if China disagrees?
Well, then, since WTO is a consensus organization, then there will not be a change, which is very problematic, of course. And then we have to continue in WTO to take them to the panels or the appellate body, that is the dispute settlement system. But unfortunately, due to Trump and then Biden and Trump again, they have blocked the appellate body persons. So it's non-function. So we have international rules, which is very good, but we don't have a body that could be the referee on the football plan of international trade. And that's a very strange situation and very tough for all small countries, because this means that might and power goes before rules and regulation, which is very problematic for Europe, of course. And we have to stay calm in this time. We have to see what we can do to help and push and give some love to WTO. And at the same time, make sure that we put in our measures that we need without becoming protectionist in Europe, because that I will warn very clearly to become protectionist. We depend on international trade. Sometimes it's like you see that you should protect the European businesses, but if we start to protect it, other nations will start to protect their businesses, and then we fragment international businesses and everyone will be worse off.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was a really great conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And I think it's time to speak, and we'll start again. Yeah, go upstairs for lunch with the party.